Have you ever heard of a family so cursed that every single one of them died within a single month, while wearing the very clothes that were supposed to make them look powerful and untouchable? This isn't just a ghost story. It's history. In the spring of 1854, the Caldwell family of Fayette County, Kentucky, 7 people across 3 generations, fell victim to something no doctor from Louisville to Cincinnati could explain. Their skin erupted in fiery rashes that turned into oozing sores. Fevers followed, then delirium, then death. One by one, the Caldwells went into the ground. But here's the chilling part. Every single one of them had been wearing newly tailored garments, all sewn by the same hands. The hands of a woman named Dinah. Before we continue, if you're fascinated by the hidden and haunted chapters of American history, the ones buried on purpose, make sure you subscribe to our channel and tap that notification bell. And drop a comment telling us what state you're watching from. We love hearing where our community of history detectives is tuning in. Now, let's step onto the Caldwell plantation, where wealth, cruelty, and revenge collided in the spring of 1854. The Caldwell Empire. The Caldwell estate sprawled across 2,300 acres of Kentucky bluegrass country, just 17 miles southeast of Lexington. Tobacco was their crown jewel, thick green leaves destined for markets in Louisville, Chicago, even New Orleans. The main house itself was a fortress of southern wealth, a Georgian colonial mansion, 6 white columns stretching skyward, verandas wrapping around like watchful arms. From its high vantage, Samuel Caldwell could look out across his kingdom of fields, forests, and enslaved people. Samuel wasn't just a farmer. He was a businessman. Tobacco, hemp for rope and bagging, lumber from his own forests, bourbon whiskey distilled and sold far and wide, his operations churned money like a machine. By 1854, he owned 57 enslaved human beings, making him one of the largest slaveholders in central Kentucky. And Samuel treated slavery exactly as he treated every other part of his business, with cold calculation. He was respected among white neighbors, feared among the enslaved. His wife, Margaret Henley Caldwell, came from Virginia tobacco royalty. To her, enslaved people were not human but machinery, to be maintained, used, and punished when they malfunctioned. She had brought 12 enslaved individuals from her own family when she married, and she ruled the domestic side of the plantation with iron authority. Living with them was Samuel's aging mother, Constance Caldwell, a 74-year-old widow who had witnessed Kentucky transform from wilderness to plantation society. Frail in body but sharp in mind, she still believed fiercely in the old codes of absolute white authority. The Caldwell children represented the future of Kentucky's slave-holding class. Thomas Caldwell, 22, fresh from Transylvania University, with dreams of political power, and a cruel streak that terrified those forced to serve him. Mary Elizabeth, 20, beautiful and engaged to marry into the powerful Pemberton family, her wedding planned for June 1854. Samuel Jr., 17, already learning the tricks of plantation management, studying both crop science and the psychology of keeping enslaved people under control. Adding to this household was Catherine Henley, Margaret's unmarried sister. At 28, Catherine relished her authority without the burden of managing her own estate. Her reputation for cruelty was whispered among the enslaved people like a dark prayer. This was the Caldwell family, wealthy, influential, and, by all appearances, untouchable. But appearances deceive. Dinah, the seamstress. Among the Caldwell's 57 enslaved people, one woman stood out. Her name was Dinah. At 29 years old, she was already known across Fayette County for her rare and dangerous combination of skill and intelligence. Dinah was the Caldwells' seamstress. She could sew with the precision of a Parisian tailor, embroider dresses that rivaled the fashions of Charleston, and design garments that made the Caldwell women the envy of Kentucky society. Ladies visiting from other plantations whispered that the Caldwell family's wardrobes could rival those of Richmond or even New York. But what they didn't know, what the Caldwell family didn't even suspect, was that Dinah's talents stretched far beyond thread and fabric. Her mother, Ruth, had been the plantation's head seamstress before her. And Ruth had taught Dinah a forbidden skill, reading and writing. Against the laws of Kentucky, Against the constant threat of punishment, Ruth had passed on her secret. And Dinah had taken it further. She learned to read fashion magazines and sewing manuals. But she also slipped into the Caldwell family's library, memorizing the exact placement of books so no one would notice they had been touched. Chemistry, botany, medicine, she devoured them all. Dinah built an invisible education, one that would have impressed a university scholar. But she kept it hidden behind lowered eyes and careful silence. Because intelligence, in the hands of an enslaved woman, was more dangerous than a blade. The breaking point. The winter of 1853-1854 had been brutal. Poor tobacco harvests tightened Samuel Caldwell's purse strings. His solution: longer workdays, smaller rations, harsher punishments. For the enslaved, it was pure suffering. For Dinah, it meant 18-hour days bent over fabric, stitching and mending until her fingers bled. She was responsible for the wardrobes of 7 demanding adults, each with their own endless requirements. New gowns for parties, tailcoats for meetings, linens for weddings, embroidery for display. Every order came with the threat of punishment if it wasn't perfect. Dinah's exhaustion grew heavy, but something else grew with it. A burning resolve. She had watched her people whipped, starved, and broken. She had watched her mother age before her time. She had been forced to smile while fitting garments onto the very bodies that controlled her fate. But Dinah had something the Caldwell family never suspected. Knowledge. Knowledge of plants. Knowledge of poisons. Knowledge of how to hide death in plain sight. And as the first blossoms of spring appeared in Kentucky, Dinah began her quiet, patient work. Not with fire. Not with a blade. But with a needle and thread. End of part 1. Right finger, would you like me to continue with part 2? Dinah beginning her secret experiments and the first Caldwell showing signs of illness in the same style, 1,000 words each. The Seamstress's Secret, part 2. What would you do if someone threatened to take away your child? Not just take them, but sell them into the unknown, never to be seen again. That was the breaking point for Dinah in February 1854. Samuel Caldwell, cold as ever, announced one evening that he planned to sell Sarah, Dinah's 14-year-old daughter. Sarah was bright, kind, and one of only 3 of Dinah's children who had survived past infancy. She was the light that kept Dinah going through endless days of exhaustion and cruelty. But Thomas, Samuel's son, had racked up a gambling debt during his college years. And Samuel had decided that Sarah would pay the price. Selling her to traders headed south, Louisiana, Mississippi, or worse, meant Dinah might never even know where her daughter ended up. For Dinah, it was the last straw. That night, and many nights after, she lay awake staring into the darkness. Something inside her shifted. The fear, the years of silent endurance, the careful act she had played of being useful but harmless, it all collapsed. Her grief turned into something sharper. Revenge. And her tools would not be fire, or knives, or poison in food. Too obvious. Too risky. No, Dinah's revenge would come through the very needle and thread that the Caldwells praised her for. Her weapon would be clothing. The deadly plan. Dinah's mind worked like a scientist. She knew each family member's habits, their vanity, their clothing needs. She had access to every wardrobe, every measurement, every upcoming commission. And she had knowledge stolen from the pages of books she was never supposed to touch. From the Caldwells' own library, she had studied chemistry, botany, and medicine. Quietly, carefully, she had experimented with Kentucky's wild plants. That winter she had tested her theories. Pokeweed roots, harvested in the fall and dried to intensify their toxins. Poison sumac oil, known to blister skin on contact. Jimson weed seeds, which could disrupt the mind. Even extracts from toxic mushrooms that thrived in the damp corners of the tobacco barns. Dinah learned how to grind, soak, and distill them into powerful solutions. She discovered how to bind these poisons to sewing thread, weaving death invisibly into fabric. The idea was genius, and terrifying. By stitching with these threads in the right places, necklines, cuffs, waistbands, seams, she could ensure the garments would press poison directly into the wearer's skin. Not enough to kill instantly, which would raise suspicion. Just enough to cause irritation, then spreading lesions, then fever, then organ failure. It would look like disease. A mystery no doctor of 1854 could solve. The first test. Dinah's chance came in March 1854. Margaret Caldwell, Samuel's wife, had ordered a brand new spring wardrobe. Gowns for luncheons, dresses for evening, riding habits, accessories, the works. The family was determined to show Fayette County that the Caldwells were still the top of Kentucky society, despite recent poor harvests. To Margaret, the clothes were symbols of wealth. To Dinah, they were the perfect delivery system. The emerald silk gown became the first test. Dinah worked with apparent eagerness, stitching until midnight by candlelight. She soaked and dried her threads again and again, layering in poisons until the fibers practically hummed with invisible danger. She used them in the bodice seams, the cuffs, the neckline, the places that would hug Margaret's skin for hours. On March 12, Margaret wore the gown proudly to a ladies' luncheon at Judge Harrison Beaumont's house in Lexington. Surrounded by the wives and daughters of the region's most powerful families, she basked in admiration. Compliments flew. Some women even asked if Dinah could sew for them. But while Margaret smiled and sipped tea, the dress was already doing its work. That night, Margaret complained of itching at her wrists and neckline. By morning, red welts had risen. She assumed it was the fabric starch, maybe a mild allergy. But within days, the rash turned to blisters. The pain spread. Fever set in. Judge Beaumont's younger brother, a respected physician, examined her but could only prescribe soothing salves. He had no idea he was watching the early stages of deliberate, systematic poisoning. Margaret's body was being betrayed by the very fabric wrapped around her. Expanding the web, Dinah showed no sign of anything but concern. She even offered to make softer garments to help Margaret's skin heal. No one suspected. Meanwhile, the rest of the family carried on with life. And each of them, unknowingly, walked into Dinah's web. Samuel Jr., preparing for a hunting trip, asked Dinah for new riding clothes. His jacket and trousers were lined with thread laced with an even stronger brew. Thomas, ambitious and cruel, requested formal wear for a political rally in Frankfort. Dinah stitched his morning coat, vest, and trousers with her deadliest preparations yet. Mary Elizabeth, still planning her June wedding, insisted on a trousseau and a gown of breathtaking beauty. Dinah poured her calculations into that project, hundreds of yards of thread, every inch stitched with precision. By April, 3 Caldwells were showing the same symptoms as Margaret: fiery rashes, oozing sores, spreading fevers. Dr. Beaumont was baffled. He noted something strange. None of the enslaved people showed a single symptom. Only the Caldwells were affected. Even stranger, the timing lined up. Each illness began shortly after the victim donned a new piece of clothing. Beaumont began to suspect the garments themselves, but how could clothing cause disease? To his 1854 medical training, the idea was impossible. Collapse. The effects grew impossible to ignore. Margaret stabilized but was left weak and scarred. Samuel Jr. lay bedridden, his torso covered in festering lesions. Thomas collapsed in the middle of a speech in Frankfort, his face contorted in agony, his skin blistered so severely onlookers thought he'd been burned with acid. News of Thomas's collapse hit the plantation like a thunderclap on April 15. The messenger delivered grim words. Thomas wasn't expected to live. Samuel Caldwell exploded in rage. To him, this wasn't sickness. This was sabotage. He believed his family was under attack by abolitionists or political rivals. He hired investigators from Louisville, men who scoured his business dealings and questioned neighbors. But they found nothing. Because the real weapon wasn't out there. It was sitting quietly in the Caldwell sewing room, in the hands of a woman they had underestimated all her life. Dinah. And she was only getting started. End of part 2. Right finger, would you like me to move on to part 3? The investigators circling closer, Dinah hiding her methods, and the next round of deaths in the same style, about 1,000 words. The Seamstress's Secret, Part 3. Imagine this. Your family is dying one by one. Doctors can't explain it. Investigators tear apart your food, your water, your household goods, looking for poison. And yet, nothing makes sense. The sickness only strikes your bloodline, nobody else. That was the nightmare inside the Caldwell mansion in April 1854. What the investigators never imagined was that the killer wasn't outside the house. She was in plain sight. A woman they saw every day. A woman holding a needle and thread. Her name was Dinah, and while doctors and sheriffs looked for answers in the barns and the wells, Dinah kept quietly stitching death into the very fabric of the family's lives. Investigators arrive. Samuel Caldwell's paranoia had reached a fever pitch. After Thomas collapsed in Frankfurt, Samuel hired private detectives from Louisville. They scoured everything, checking for poison in the larder, testing the water supply, even searching the tobacco barns. They found nothing. For Dinah, their failure was a shield. She knew the longer they hunted for outside enemies, the safer she was. Her years of playing the role of loyal, competent house servant worked in her favor. Who would ever suspect the seamstress who dressed them in finery to be the architect of their suffering? But Dinah also understood something chilling. Once the investigators ran out of places to look, they would turn inward. They would begin to suspect the household itself. The enslaved. The ones closest to the Caldwells. If that happened, suspicion would fall on everyone, guilty or innocent. And Dinah wasn't finished yet. The final phase. With Margaret, Samuel Jr., and Thomas already collapsing under her poisons, Dinah turned to the three who remained untouched: elderly Constance, Catherine Henley, and Samuel Caldwell himself. These garments would be her masterpiece, each piece carefully designed with everything she had learned from her earlier experiments. For Constance, Samuel's aging mother, she prepared a soft mourning dress. The sleeves and collar were stitched with a slower-acting but more devastating toxin. At 74, Constance's body was frail. Dinah knew it wouldn't take much to push her into decline. For Catherine Henley, Samuel's cruel sister-in-law, Dinah stitched a riding habit. Catherine's pride was her posture and elegance on horseback. Dinah laced the seams of the jacket with a preparation designed to blister skin within hours. And for Samuel Caldwell himself, she prepared a vest, the most dangerous garment she had ever constructed. Every stitch along the lining carried her deadliest formula. The fabric would press directly against his chest and torso. Dinah calculated that within a few days of wear, the master of the Caldwell plantation would be brought to his knees. It was bold, it was brilliant, but it was also dangerous. Dinah was pushing her plan to its absolute limit, at the very moment when suspicion was starting to shift closer to home. A new doctor. By late April, Drive. Beaumont, the local physician, was desperate. He admitted that the illness was beyond him. Letters he sent to colleagues survive today in the archives of the American Medical Association. His words reveal a man at the edge of his knowledge, searching for answers in the dark. On April 28, 1854, a new figure arrived at the Caldwell plantation, Drive. Marcus Webb, a young professor from the University of Louisville Medical School. Unlike Beaumont, Webb carried primitive toxicology tools and an experimental mindset. He tested fabric samples. He examined tissue from the wounds. He studied fragments of clothing. And his conclusion stunned him. This wasn't disease. This wasn't contagion. This was poisoning. Webb couldn't identify the exact plants. His tools were too limited. But he confirmed something unthinkable for the time: the Caldwell family was being poisoned through their clothing. Fear among the enslaved. The news spread quickly across the plantation. And with it came terror. Because in Kentucky, 1854, if an enslaved person was even suspected of rebellion or poisoning, the punishment was collective. The innocent suffered with the guilty. A whisper of uprising could lead to executions, torture, or mass sale to the Deep South. The enslaved community at Caldwell Plantation lived under that shadow. Dinah's plan, brilliant as it was, put every life in danger, not just her own. One man saw the truth more clearly than anyone: Solomon Wright. Solomon's secret. Solomon was 73 years old, a survivor of over 40 years of bondage under the Caldwell name. His role was tending the herb garden, growing plants used for simple remedies and dyes. He had an encyclopedic knowledge of Kentucky flora, especially the dangerous ones. And he had been watching Dinah. He noticed her gathering plants at strange times of year. He noticed how carefully she handled certain roots and leaves. And he noticed the correlation. Every time Dinah finished a special garment, a Caldwell fell ill. Solomon never spoke of it openly. But inside, he wrestled with an impossible choice. Should he reveal what he suspected? If he did, white authorities would not only punish Dinah but unleash unspeakable violence on the entire enslaved community. Innocent men, women, and children could be whipped, sold, or executed. But if he stayed silent, he would be complicit in murder. Solomon's torment mirrored the nightmare of slavery itself. People forced into impossible moral traps, where every choice meant suffering. The law arrives. On May 2, 1854, the investigation escalated. Sheriff Benjamin Hargrove of Fayette County rode onto the plantation with federal marshals. Rumors had spread of similar poisonings in other counties, and the government was taking no chances. The Caldwell plantation shifted overnight from a house of mystery into a crime scene. Hargrove followed Samuel Caldwell's lead at first, chasing the theory of outside enemies, abolitionists, political rivals, secret societies. But one of his deputies, James Fletcher, had sharper instincts. Fletcher studied the evidence. Only the Caldwells were affected. The illnesses began right after wearing new garments. And the sophistication of the poison suggested deep knowledge of plants and habits. This wasn't the work of strangers. This was an inside job. The strain on Dinah. Through all of this, Dinah performed her role flawlessly. She sewed. She comforted Margaret. She expressed concern. To the white investigators, she appeared the model of loyalty. But inside, the strain was crushing her. Holding in the truth, smiling as the family she despised writhed in agony. Watching her own people grow terrified of discovery. Other enslaved workers began to notice. Small things. The way Dinah's hands sometimes trembled. The distant look in her eyes when she thought no one was watching. They didn't know the details, but they sensed she was carrying a terrible secret. The net tightens. By May, the air in the Caldwell house was thick with suspicion. The white family was falling apart, poisoned from within. The enslaved lived in fear, knowing the noose of collective punishment hung over all of them. And Dinah, she was finishing the garments that would decide the fate of Constance, Catherine, and Samuel Caldwell himself. Each stitch pulled the story tighter. Each poisoned thread brought her closer to triumph, and closer to discovery. Because now, for the first time, the investigators were looking in the right direction. And someone on the plantation, old Solomon, knew the truth. End of part 3. Right finger, would you like me to continue with part 4? Constance, Catherine, and Samuel begin to wear their poisoned garments, while suspicion grows inside the house and Solomon struggles with his secret in the same dramatic 1,000-word format. Part 4. The suspicion turns inward. Hook. Imagine living in a house where death visits room after room, yet no one can see the killer's hand. Every morning you wake up, wondering, who will be next? By spring of 1854, the Caldwell plantation was no longer a place of wealth and pride. It had become a haunted battlefield of paranoia, suspicion, and unseen terror. The spring air on the Caldwell plantation carried the heavy scent of magnolias, but inside the mansion, the smell of sickness and fear dominated. Samuel Caldwell, once a man of fierce confidence and wealth, now paced the halls like a restless ghost. His family continued to fall victim, one by one, to the mysterious illnesses. Dr. Beaumont's treatments had failed. Remedies, bleeding, and purging did nothing. Samuel grew desperate, certain that enemies outside his walls, abolitionists, rival planters, or jealous neighbors, had launched a plot to destroy him. But time was running out. As April gave way to May, the whispers grew louder. What if the danger wasn't outside at all? What if it was within the house, hidden in plain sight? Arrival of Dr. Webb. On April 28, 1854, a new figure arrived, Drive. Marcus Webb from the University of Louisville. Unlike Beaumont, Drive, Webb brought with him a small collection of early toxicology tools, glass vials, reagents, and crude microscopes. His methods seemed almost like magic to those who had never seen science applied so systematically. He took fabric from garments, clippings of cloth from sleeves and collars, and even scraped residue from the inside of shoes. His analysis was primitive by modern standards, but it was enough to confirm something terrifying. The sickness wasn't random. The Caldwell family was being poisoned. Dr. Webb could not identify every plant or substance, but he detected organic compounds in clothing fibers, compounds that should never have been there. He concluded that a slow-acting toxin was being absorbed through daily wear. Samuel Caldwell flew into a rage at the news. "Who dares attack my family in this way?" he thundered. To him, it was proof of his belief that outsiders had launched some invisible war against the Caldwells. But to others, the truth was far more unsettling. Fear among the enslaved. The enslaved population felt the shift immediately. Soldiers, marshals, and county sheriffs soon crowded the plantation grounds. Everyone was under suspicion now. The enslaved knew what this meant. If the guilty person was found among them, punishment would not stop at one individual. Retaliation would fall on all their heads, beatings, executions, or being sold down to the brutal fields of the Deep South. This fear silenced most, but one man, Solomon Wright, carried a heavier burden than the rest. Solomon's terrible knowledge. Solomon was 73 years old, a frail but wise man who had lived his entire life enslaved on the Caldwell land. He tended the herb gardens, using plants to soothe fevers and heal wounds among his people. His knowledge of roots and leaves was respected by the enslaved and ignored by the white family who saw him as just another tool. But Solomon had sharp eyes. He noticed what others missed. Over the past year, he had watched Dinah, Caldwell's trusted house servant, take a keen interest in certain plants. Foxglove, nightshade, wild hemlock. Plants no one used for dyeing or healing. He had seen her dry leaves in secret, grind powders in small wooden bowls, and hide the remains beneath cloth scraps. At first, he thought nothing. Perhaps she was experimenting, curious. But then the family fell ill, one by one. And each sickness seemed to follow shortly after Dinah completed a special garment for them. Solomon connected the dots. Dinah was behind it. The moral dilemma. But knowing the truth was not a blessing. It was a curse. If Solomon revealed what he suspected, the white authorities would descend with fury. They would not just punish Dinah, they would punish every enslaved man, woman, and child on the plantation. Innocent people would hang for crimes they never touched. Families would be torn apart. If Solomon kept silent, more Caldwells would die, and the killing would continue. The family's collapse might mean freedom for some, but the risk of discovery still loomed over them all. It was a choice with no right answer. Stay silent and watch death spread, or speak and unleash a storm of blood. The old man carried this weight alone, knowing that either decision might doom his people. Samuel's paranoia. Meanwhile, Samuel Caldwell's paranoia deepened. He no longer trusted his neighbors. He no longer trusted his own house. He accused rival planters of slipping into the mansion at night. He even suspected his own wife, though he dared not say it aloud. The more he raged, the more unstable the household became. Servants trembled at his commands. Family members whispered of curses and hexes. Some believed the mansion itself had turned against them. But the truth sat quietly in the sewing room, where Dinah continued her work with needle and thread. Her calm smile masked the storm raging inside her. Dinah's final preparations. Dinah knew time was running short. Investigators had begun to suspect someone within the house. She had to act quickly, before suspicion turned to her. She prepared 3 final garments. A mourning dress for elderly Constance, infused with a mixture that would cripple her body slowly, inch by inch. A delicate gown for Catherine, stitched with just enough poison to bring weakness and trembling within days. And for Samuel Caldwell himself, a vest unlike any she had made before. This piece carried her deadliest mixture yet, designed not for slow torment but for swift, devastating collapse. Each stitch was a risk. Each garment could be her last. But Dinah's hatred had grown into something unstoppable. Years of suffering, humiliation, and brutality had sharpened her resolve. Now, with the Caldwells weakening before her eyes, she was closer than ever to vengeance. The House of Fear. By May 2nd, Sheriff Benjamin Hargrove arrived with deputies and federal marshals. What began as a medical mystery was now an official criminal investigation. The mansion, once a symbol of wealth, had become a fortress of fear. Every knock at the door, every creak of the wooden floorboards seemed to carry the threat of exposure. The enslaved whispered in corners, unsure of who might be blamed. The White family prayed desperately, clinging to hope that salvation would come. And Dinah, still calm, still composed, kept sewing in silence. But the walls were closing in. The investigators were getting closer. And the truth was about to rip the Caldwell plantation apart. Check mark. End of part 4. Would you like me to make part 5 even darker, where suspicion starts turning directly toward the enslaved community and Dinah's mask begins to slip, or keep it more focused on the growing investigations with a slow burn toward her exposure? Part 5. Shadows of Betrayal. Hook. What if the walls of your home began to whisper against you? What if every glance, every step, every silence felt like an accusation? By the summer of 1854, the Caldwell mansion was no longer just a place of sickness, it had become a prison of suspicion, where trust itself was dying faster than the family. Fear spreads like fire. The mansion's long halls echoed with more than footsteps now. They carried whispers, half-spoken suspicions, and rumors that clung like smoke to every corner. Samuel Caldwell demanded that guards patrol the plantation day and night. His once proud home became a locked fortress. Visitors were searched, food was inspected, and even water was drawn under watchful eyes. But still, the sickness spread. Neighbors began to keep their distance. The Caldwell family, once invited to every dinner and ball, was now avoided. Some whispered that the family was cursed. Others claimed God himself had turned against them. Inside, the family no longer trusted one another. Catherine's hands shook with fear whenever Samuel entered a room. Constance barely left her chamber. And Samuel's eyes, once burning with pride, now darted constantly, like a man being hunted. The investigators' warning. Sheriff Benjamin Hargrove, tired and gaunt, returned one hot June morning with grim news. "Mr. Caldwell," he said, placing his hat on the table, "this is no ordinary sickness. Dr. Webb insists your family has been poisoned. And if that's true, then someone under your roof is the killer." The words struck like thunder. The air in the parlor seemed to vanish. Samuel's gaze moved from servant to servant, from family member to family member. "Then we find them," he snarled, "and when we do, I'll see them torn apart for this treachery." But the sheriff's warning came with a darker note. "Be careful, Caldwell. If you accuse the wrong soul, the whole county will bleed for it. Fear breeds violence. Violence breeds revenge. The enslaved in peril. Among the enslaved community, terror spread even faster. Some had begun to believe that the plantation itself was cursed, that evil spirits had risen from the swamps to strike down the Caldwells. Others knew better. They had seen Dinah's secretive work, her careful handling of plants that no ordinary healer would touch. They whispered her name in the dark, not out of accusation, but out of awe and dread. But silence ruled them. No one dared speak aloud what they suspected. If Dinah was discovered, the lash would not stop with her, it would fall upon every man, woman, and child. Families would be sold away, chains would rattle, and the fields would run red. So they endured, watching in silence, praying that the storm would pass. Dinah's cold resolve. Dinah, however, showed no fear. Each day she moved calmly through the mansion, her hands busy with needle and thread. She greeted her masters with the same polite bow, the same gentle words. To them, she was invisible, a servant too loyal, too quiet to ever be a threat. But inside her heart burned like a furnace. She had endured whips, hunger, and humiliation for years. She had watched friends beaten and children torn from their mother's arms. And now, with every poisoned stitch, she felt power returning to her hands. For the first time in her life, the Caldwells were weak. She was strong. Still, Dinah was no fool. She knew the noose of suspicion was tightening. She heard the sheriff's words, saw the nervous glances, and understood that time was running out. So she worked faster. The vest for Samuel Caldwell, her masterpiece of vengeance, was nearly complete. Solomon's breaking point. Old Solomon could no longer sleep. His conscience gnawed at him like a starving rat. He saw what Dinah was doing, knew what plants she had gathered, and understood what each stitch meant. But to speak was to betray his own people. To remain silent was to watch innocent lives crumble. One night, under the pale glow of a lantern, Solomon slipped into the quarters of Sarah, a young mother of 2. He confessed his knowledge in whispers. "It's Dinah," he said, voice trembling. "She's the hand behind this. If they find out, child, they'll destroy us all." Sarah's eyes widened with horror. She begged him to stay quiet, to let the curse run its course. "What freedom will we have if we're dead?" she asked. But Solomon was torn. His old bones carried too much guilt already. Each day he wavered closer to telling the truth. Samuel's madness. Meanwhile, Samuel Caldwell's sanity began to unravel. Nights found him wandering the halls with a pistol in hand, muttering to himself. He accused servants of spying, demanded that his wife swear her loyalty, and even struck Catherine across the face during a fit of rage. At dinner, he would stare at his plate for long minutes before eating, convinced that poison lurked in every bite. He made his children taste food first, watching their expressions with wild eyes. The master of the plantation was becoming his own ghost. And Dinah smiled in the shadows, her plan unfolding perfectly. The ghost in the sewing room. By July, the sewing room itself took on a haunted aura. Servants whispered that anyone who lingered there too long heard voices, whispers from the garments, sighs from the poisoned threads. Some swore they saw shadows move where no light touched. In truth, the room carried the weight of death. Each garment sewn within its walls was a silent coffin. Dinah's hands were steady, her breath calm, but the air around her seemed charged with something unholy. Even Solomon, who had lived through decades of sorrow, felt his knees weaken when he passed the room. He believed that Dinah had not only poisoned the Caldwells but also summoned something darker to guide her hand. The breaking storm. On July 12, 1854, Sheriff Hargrove returned with new evidence. A neighbor had reported seeing Dinah in the fields, gathering plants not used for food or medicine. Samuel seized upon this at once. "Her! It must be her!" he roared. "The needle, the thread, the sickness, she is the hand of the devil in this house." But the sheriff hesitated. "Accusations are not proof. If you condemn her without trial, the county will turn on you. I need hard evidence, Caldwell. Something undeniable." Still, the damage was done. Eyes turned toward Dinah. Whispers grew louder. Fear among the enslaved reached its breaking point. And Dinah, though her face remained calm, knew the endgame had arrived. The vest of death. That night, alone in the sewing room, Dinah finished her final piece, the vest meant for Samuel Caldwell himself. She folded it neatly, smoothed the fabric, and whispered a single word under her breath. Justice. The vest was not just clothing. It was a weapon, and once Samuel wore it, the master of the Caldwell plantation would never draw another breath. But unseen by her, Solomon watched from the doorway, his face shadowed with torment. His silence had ended. Tomorrow, he would speak. Tomorrow, the secret would shatter. Checkmark. End of part 5. Do you want me to make part 6 the climax, where Solomon exposes Dinah, the investigation explodes, and horror reaches its peak, or should part 6 build slower, leading to part 7 for the climax? Part 6 The Gathering Storm. Hook. What happens when secrets are no longer whispered but shouted? When a single truth threatens to tear apart an entire household? By the summer's end, the Caldwell plantation was a powder keg. All it needed was a spark, and the spark was coming. Solomon's heavy burden. Old Solomon had carried his silence for too long. Every night he woke drenched in sweat, hearing the echo of Dinah's needle scratching through fabric, as if the sound itself was sowing death into the house. He remembered the children coughing in their beds, Catherine's trembling hands, Constance wasting away to a shadow. And above all, he remembered the rage in Samuel Caldwell's eyes, the kind of rage that sought a scapegoat. Solomon knew the truth, that Dinah was behind the poisoned garments, but telling it meant betraying one of his own. Staying silent meant watching the lash fall upon many. His heart was torn in two, and he knew that whichever path he chose, blood would follow. The sheriff returns. In late July, Sheriff Benjamin Hargrove arrived again, dust caked on his boots, a journal clutched in his hand. "I've been keeping notes," he said, placing the leather-bound book on Samuel's desk. "Each death, each sickness, it all points to one place. The garments, Mr. Caldwell. Every person who's fallen ill has worn something sewn in this house." Samuel's jaw tightened. He turned toward the sewing room with hatred in his eyes. "Then we search it," he growled. Dinah stood nearby, her face a mask of calm obedience. Inside, her pulse quickened, but her hands remained still at her sides. The search began at once. Drawers were opened, shelves overturned, fabric pulled apart. The air filled with dust and tension. But no poison was found. No bottle, no pouch, no vial. Just thread, needles, and folded garments. The sheriff frowned, frustrated. "If she's hiding something, she's clever. Too clever." Samuel's rage only deepened. "Then we watch her," he hissed. "Day and night, until she slips. The mansion turns against itself." From that day forward, the mansion was divided by suspicion. Guards followed Dinah's every step, though they never saw her falter. The servants whispered in fear, some beginning to suspect her, others convinced that Samuel had gone mad. The Caldwell family grew weaker. Catherine barely rose from her bed. Constance drifted in and out of fever dreams. Even Samuel's strength began to wither, though he refused to admit it. At night, he drank heavily, stumbling through the halls, pistol in hand. More than once, his shouts woke the entire household. He accused his wife of betrayal, his children of cowardice, even the sheriff of incompetence. The once great master of the plantation was unraveling before their eyes. Dinah's quiet defiance. Through it all, Dinah remained steady. She moved like a shadow, carrying trays, sewing garments, whispering quiet prayers in the quarters. But her prayers were not to the God Samuel Caldwell prayed to. No, her prayers were older, whispered in a tongue most had forgotten. Each stitch of the vest carried not only poison but intention. Vengeance was a language, and Dinah had learned to speak it fluently. Still, she knew her time was running short. The sheriff's suspicion was sharp, and Solomon's eyes lingered too long. She could feel his guilt like heat against her skin. She would have to act soon, or lose everything. Solomon's near confession. One evening, as a storm gathered outside, Solomon stood before Sheriff Hargrove. His hands trembled, his voice cracked. "Sheriff," he whispered, I think I know who's behind this." The sheriff leaned forward, his expression grave. "Then speak, old man. Speak before more die." But Solomon's courage failed him. The words caught in his throat. He saw Dinah across the room, her dark eyes fixed upon him, not pleading, not threatening, but steady. Almost as if she already knew what he might say. The storm outside cracked with thunder, and Solomon's silence stretched too long. Finally, he shook his head. "It ain't my place," he muttered, turning away. The sheriff slammed his fist on the table. "Then God help us all, because your silence is killing them." The apparition. That night, lightning split the sky, and the storm raged over the plantation. Windows rattled, shutters banged, and the house groaned under the weight of wind. In the sewing room, where Dinah had left the finished vest draped across a chair, something strange occurred. Catherine Caldwell, fevered and restless, wandered into the room. She reached out a trembling hand to touch the vest. The moment her fingers brushed the fabric, she screamed. She claimed she saw a figure standing in the corner, A woman draped in shadows, her eyes glowing, her mouth sewn shut with black thread. The scream echoed through the mansion, waking everyone. Servants rushed in, followed by Samuel with his pistol drawn. Catherine collapsed, weeping, swearing that the room was cursed. The vest lay untouched, but the terror it sparked spread like fire. The sheriff's dilemma. Sheriff Hargrove began to wonder if this was more than poison. He had seen sickness before, had seen murder, but this felt like something older, something darker. "Your house is cursed, Caldwell," he said quietly the next morning. "And curses don't die easy." Samuel's face twisted with rage. "It's not a curse, it's betrayal. Someone under my roof wants me dead, and I'll find them if I have to burn this place to the ground." But even the sheriff, hardened by years of law and blood, could not shake the feeling that the sewing room itself had come alive, that Dinah's needle had sewn not just death, but spirits. The breaking point. By August, the Caldwell plantation was on the edge of collapse. Crops withered from neglect, workers fled into the night, and the family wasted away behind locked doors. Samuel, more paranoid than ever, ordered a public gathering. "Tomorrow," he declared, "we bring everyone, family, servants, slaves, all of them, into the Great Hall. We will have answers. If the guilty one does not confess, then we will make them." His words were like a spark thrown into dry grass. Fear rippled through the household. The enslaved whispered in panic. The servants prayed. And Dinah, calm and composed, finished the final stitch on the vest. "Tomorrow," she thought, "Samuel Caldwell will wear his judgment." But Solomon, pacing in the shadows, knew he could not wait any longer. Tomorrow, he would speak. Tomorrow, he would reveal the truth, before the mansion consumed them all. Checkmark. End of part 6. This keeps the tension building. Samuel paranoid, Catherine seeing an apparition, Solomon on the edge of confession, and Dinah's final vest completed. Do you want me to make part 7 the night of the Great Gathering, where the accusations erupt and horror takes center stage? Part 7 The Night of Reckoning. Hook. There are nights that carve themselves into history, not because of battles or kings, but because an ordinary house dared to hold too much evil. That night, when Samuel Caldwell ordered every soul under his roof into the Great Hall, the storm outside was nothing compared to the one about to break inside. The gathering. The Great Hall of the Caldwell mansion had never been so crowded. Candles flickered against the high ceiling, throwing uneasy shadows across portraits of stern ancestors. The smell of sweat, sickness, and fear clung to the air. Samuel Caldwell stood at the head of the room, pistol at his hip, eyes bloodshot from sleepless nights. His once proud frame seemed shrunken, yet his voice still carried authority. "Tonight," he thundered, "the guilty will show themselves. Too long has my house been plagued with poison, with whispers, with death. No more." His family sat nearby, Catherine pale and trembling, Constance wrapped in blankets, her breath shallow. The servants and enslaved stood in silence along the walls, their eyes downcast but ears sharp. And at the back of the hall, Dinah stood motionless, her hands folded before her, her face unreadable. Accusations fly. The sheriff stepped forward, his journal in hand. Every illness in this house began with clothing. A garment, a blanket, a piece of fabric touched by poison. His voice grew harder. "Someone here is using a needle as a weapon." The crowd shifted uneasily. Murmurs rippled through the enslaved, prayers whispered under breath. Samuel pointed a shaking finger at Dinah. "It's her. She's the one. She's been sowing death into my home." A gasp rose from the servants. All eyes turned to Dinah. But she did not flinch. She met Samuel's gaze with quiet strength. "I sow what I am told, Master Caldwell," she said evenly. Nothing more. Her calmness unsettled the room more than any outburst could have. Solomon's breaking point. Old Solomon could no longer bear the weight on his chest. His voice cracked as he stepped forward. "Master, Sheriff, it's true. I've seen things." His hands shook violently. Needles, herbs, powders stitched where no one could see. "Dinah's been workin' more than cloth. She's been workin' death." The room erupted. Shouts, curses, cries. Some turned on Dinah with fear, others recoiled from Solomon as if he'd betrayed them all. Samuel's eyes burned with triumph. You see, even her own people admit it. Sheriff, arrest her. Chain her if you must. But the sheriff did not move. His gaze lingered on Dinah, and for the first time, he looked uncertain. Dinah speaks. Slowly, Dinah raised her head. The flickering candles seemed to bend toward her, as if the air itself shifted. You think chains can hold me? She said softly, but her words carried through the hall. You think truth is yours to command? No, Master Caldwell, the truth has already been sown, and tonight, it will be worn. Her eyes drifted to the vest laid out on the table beside Samuel's chair. The final garment, the cursed garment. A murmur of dread swept through the crowd. Even those who had not believed began to shiver. The first death. Before Samuel could respond, a scream tore through the hall. One of the younger servants collapsed, clutching his throat. His skin turned gray, his eyes bulged, foam spilling from his lips. Chaos erupted. Some fled toward the doors, only to find them barred shut. Others fell to their knees, praying, weeping. The sheriff knelt beside the fallen boy, his hands shaking. Poison, he whispered. But how? He wasn't wearing a thing. Dinah's lips curved into the faintest smile. Not all poison is swallowed. Some is spoken, some is remembered. Samuel roared, drawing his pistol, aiming it at her head. Which? I'll end this now. The haunting. The moment his finger tightened on the trigger, every candle in the hall guttered out. The room plunged into darkness. And then came the sound, the unmistakable scrape of a needle through fabric. Long, slow, deliberate. Stitch by stitch, echoing in the pitch black. Women screamed, men cursed. The sheriff shouted for light. When the candles flared again, Samuel's pistol was gone, from his own hand. It lay across the room, as if torn from him. And on his chest, the cursed vest. Gasps and shrieks filled the hall. None had seen it placed there, but it fit as if it had always belonged. Samuel clawed at it, his face contorting in terror. No, get it off me. But the fabric clung to him like a second skin, every tug only tightening it further. Madness unleashed. Samuel staggered through the hall, crashing into tables, knocking over chairs. His pistol discharged into the ceiling, showering plaster dust. The sheriff and Solomon rushed to help him, but each time they touched the vest, their hands burned as if scalded. Samuel's screams grew hoarse, then choked, then gurgling. He fell to his knees, convulsing, foam at his lips. The Caldwell master, so feared, so brutal, died writhing like an animal before the eyes of his household. The room fell silent, save for Catherine's weeping. And then, faint but unmistakable, came the sound again, the needle scratching through cloth. But this time, it came from nowhere. From everywhere. The sheriff's realization. The sheriff staggered back, his face pale. This isn't just poison. This is a curse. And it won't stop with him. Dinah's eyes glistened in the candlelight. Caldwell was the first thread. The rest must follow. Only then will the garment be complete. Her words sent ice through every soul in the hall. The curse was not finished. It was only beginning. Catherine's plea. Catherine rose from her seat, weak and trembling, but with a strength born of desperation. She stumbled toward Dinah, falling to her knees before her. Please, she begged, clutching the hem of Dinah's dress. Spare my children. Whatever anger you carry, let it fall on me. But not them. For the first time, Dinah's expression softened. Her eyes flicked toward Constance, pale as death in her chair, and for a heartbeat, something human returned to her face. But only for a heartbeat. The garment decides, Dinah whispered. Not I. The doors open. At that moment, the great oak doors of the hall creaked open, though no hand touched them. Cold wind swept in, snuffing out several candles. And, in that wind came whispers, low, mournful, in tongues long dead. The sound of the enslaved who had died on that land. The sound of suffering sewn into every wall of the mansion. The crowd shrieked, stumbling back. Some fled through the open doors into the storm, while others froze, too terrified to move. Dinah stood tall, her eyes glowing faintly in the candlelight, her voice rising over the chaos. Tonight, the house of Caldwell unravels. And nothing will sew it back together. Checkmark. End of part 7. Here, the story explodes into open horror. The cursed vest attaches itself to Samuel, killing him, the supernatural forces emerge, and Dinah's vengeance is revealed to be bigger than just one man, it's the whole Caldwell legacy. Do you want me to make part 8 dive into the aftermath of Samuel's death, when the household tries to escape, but the curse begins hunting each of them, one by one? Part 8. The Threads of Terror. Hook. When a house loses its master, it should find peace. But when Samuel Caldwell collapsed dead on his own floor, the Caldwell mansion did not fall silent, it came alive. And those trapped inside soon learned that death was only the beginning of the curse. The aftermath of the death. For a long moment, no one moved. Samuel's body twitched once more, then lay still, the cursed vest clinging to him as if stitched into his flesh. His eyes stared blankly at the ceiling, wide with terror even in death. Catherine wailed, cradling his head in her lap, while Constance's coughing fit shook her frail body. The servants pressed against the walls, whispering prayers, while the enslaved shifted restlessly, torn between fear and a grim, forbidden satisfaction. And in the center of it all, Dinah stood tall, her shadow stretching unnaturally long across the floor. The sheriff's warning. The sheriff, shaken but not broken, stepped forward, his hand on his revolver. He stared at Samuel's corpse, then at Dinah. This curse, he said hoarsely, it won't end here, will it? It'll take the rest of the family. Dinah's voice was calm, measured, almost ceremonial. The Caldwells are threads in a poisoned cloth. One by one, they will unravel. Catherine looked up, her eyes red and swollen. No, my children, please, Sheriff, protect them. But even as she spoke, the great hall groaned. The portraits of the Caldwell ancestors lining the walls began to shiver, their painted eyes seeming to follow the living. One by one, the frames tilted and fell, glass shattering across the wooden floor. Flight into the storm. Panic broke the crowd. Servants bolted for the doors, pushing past one another, some fleeing into the storm, others frozen in terror at the whispers riding the wind. Catherine, clutching Constance, screamed for help as two maids carried the sick girl toward the stairs. The sheriff ordered men to barricade the hall, but no one listened, fear had splintered the household into chaos. Solomon, old and trembling, made his way toward Dinah, falling to his knees before her. Please, mistress, whatever bargain you made, whatever spirits you called, end it before all are lost. But Dinah's eyes glistened coldly. It cannot be unstitched, Solomon. This cloth was woven long before tonight. The curse spreads. In the upper chambers, screams rang out. A young maid stumbled back down the stairs, clutching her arm. Her sleeve had unraveled on its own, threads twisting around her skin, burrowing into her flesh like worms. She shrieked, clawing at her arm, until she collapsed, blood soaking the stairs. Catherine's other daughter, little Margaret, shrieked and clung to her mother's skirts. Mama, the walls are moving. And indeed, they were. The wallpaper, patterned with roses, began to peel and writhe. The roses darkened into thorny vines, curling down the walls, clutching at anything in reach. The house itself was unraveling, its very fabric alive with the curse. The sheriff's stand. Desperation hardened the sheriff's face. He drew his revolver and fired a shot into the ceiling to silence the chaos. Everyone, listen to me, he roared. We must leave this place. Gather what you can, food, water. We move together, now. But as he spoke, a heavy slam shook the hall. The great oak doors that had swung open moments before now slammed shut, sealing them in. The wind cut off, replaced by an oppressive silence. When the sheriff tried the doors, they would not budge. This house, Dinah whispered, does not let go of its threads. Catherine's defiance. Catherine Caldwell rose to her feet, pale but fierce. She stood between Dinah and her children, trembling yet unyielding. You may hate my husband, you may hate this family, she said, voice breaking, but I will not let you destroy what little is left. If it is me you want, then take me. For the first time, Dinah faltered. Her eyes flicked to Catherine, this woman who had suffered her husband's cruelty almost as much as the enslaved had. The candlelight softened her expression, but only briefly. The garment chooses, she repeated coldly. Not I. Constance's vision. As Catherine pleaded, Constance stirred in her blanket, her sickly face pale as bone. She sat up with sudden strength, her eyes glassy and distant. They're here, she whispered. All of them. The ones who died in the fields, the ones who hung from the trees, the ones buried with no name. They've come to claim us. Her voice shifted, older, deeper, layered with voices not her own. The Caldwell line is stitched in blood. And blood is the only thread strong enough to cut it. The hall fell silent, even Dinah stepped back, as though recognizing a power beyond her own. Constance collapsed again, coughing blood, her words echoing in every ear. The fire. As night deepened, the mansion itself seemed to turn against them. The hearth erupted, flames leaping higher than the logs should allow, smoke filling the air. Curtains caught fire without touching a spark, yet the flames burned cold, blue instead of orange. One of the servants screamed as the fire licked at his clothes, but instead of burning, the fabric fused to his skin. He clawed at it, shrieking, until he crumpled into silence. The sheriff grabbed Catherine's arm. We have to get out, now, before we're all ghosts in this cursed house. But Dinah only smiled faintly. There is no outside, not tonight. The final seal. At the stroke of midnight, the grandfather clock in the hall began to chime. With each strike, the mansion shook. Cracks split the plaster, dust raining from the ceiling. On the 12th chime, Samuel's corpse twitched. His eyes rolled back, and with a sickening crack, he rose to his feet, the vest still clinging to him, blackened and burned. The dead master of Caldwell House now stood among them once more. Catherine shrieked. The sheriff fired his revolver, the shots echoing, but the bullets only sank into Samuel's body like stones into mud. Dinah's voice rang out, not triumphant but solemn, as if reciting scripture. The first thread is cut. 9 remain. Terror in the hall. The household scattered. Some fled up the stairs, others into the kitchens, others still huddled in corners praying desperately. But no matter where they turned, the house shifted, doors leading to walls, hallways folding back into themselves. The Caldwell mansion had become a labyrinth, a prison woven of wood, stone, and curse. And Samuel, his face twisted, his body half dead, began to walk among them, dragging his cursed vest like a shroud. The Caldwell family's night of reckoning was only beginning. Checkmark. End of part 8. Here the curse takes full control. The mansion itself turns alive, the dead master rises, and the family realizes they are trapped. Dinah is revealed as the vessel, but the curse is older, darker, and fueled by generations of Caldwell blood. Would you like me to make part 9 focus on the survivors, desperate attempts to fight back or escape, while the curse hunts them one by one, tightening toward its final victims? Part 9. The House of 9 Threads. Hook. Every prison has walls. But the Caldwell mansion had no walls, it had veins. And as the survivors stumbled through its twisting halls, they discovered the house was no longer a home, but a living thing hungry to keep them inside. The walking corpse. Samuel Caldwell's lifeless eyes glistened with a milky sheen as he dragged his stiff legs across the hall. The cursed vest clung to him, writhing as though made of living thread. Each step he took tore splinters from the wooden floor. The sheriff fired again, his revolver emptying into Samuel's chest, but the body did not fall. The bullets sank soundlessly, leaving only holes that oozed black threads instead of blood. Catherine clutched her children close, her heart pounding. "That's not him," she whispered. "That's not my husband." Dinah stood silent in the corner, her eyes fixed on Samuel as though watching a prophecy unfold. "The dead do not return as they were," she said softly. "He is the first thread cut loose, and now the cloth begins to unravel." The house shifts. The survivors, Catherine, Constance, Margaret, the sheriff, Dinah, Solomon, and a handful of servants, gathered in the hall, debating escape. But as they tried to retrace their steps, the house betrayed them. Doors that once led to the outside now opened into endless hallways. The kitchen dissolved into a black void of shifting walls. A stairwell twisted like a spiral of bone, leading only deeper into darkness. Margaret clung to her mother's skirts. "Mama, the house doesn't like us anymore." The sheriff clenched his jaw. "It's not the house, child, it's the curse. It's alive. A failed escape. Two servants, desperate for freedom, broke from the group and sprinted toward a side door. They smashed it open with a candlestick and hurled themselves into the storm outside, only to vanish the moment they crossed the threshold. Their screams echoed through the house, not from outside, but from above, as if the walls themselves had swallowed them whole. Seconds later, strips of fabric drifted down from the ceiling, torn scraps of their clothing, bloodied and frayed. Catherine covered Margaret's eyes, but the child had already seen. Her small voice quivered. "The house ate them. The threads tightened. The curse spread like a plague. Curtains writhed like serpents. Carpets bulged and shifted underfoot, as though pulsing with a heartbeat. The very walls groaned, whispering in voices long dead. Constance, feverish and pale, spoke again in her strange, otherworldly tone. 9 threads remain, and they will not all die by flesh. Some will be taken by madness, some by fire, some by the cloth itself." Her words froze the group. Catherine grabbed her daughter by the shoulders, shaking her gently. "Constance, stop, don't say such things." But Constance only blinked slowly, her lips cracking into a faint smile. "I only repeat what they tell me. Solomon's story." Old Solomon, trembling, raised his hand. His voice was rough with age and sorrow. "This curse did not begin tonight. Long ago, Samuel's grandfather bought a weaver, an African woman with hands skilled in magic as much as in cloth. She was forced to sew garments for the family, but in secret. She wove spells into every thread. They whipped her when she spoke her tongue, they starved her when she prayed, and finally, they buried her alive when she refused to finish a garment for the master's son. But her curse lived on, stitched into the fabric of every Caldwell home." Catherine gasped, her hand covering her mouth. Dinah lowered her gaze, her silence confirming the truth. The sheriff spat on the floor. "So this house is cursed with her vengeance. And we're just, what, threads in her damn tapestry." Dinah finally spoke. "Not vengeance. Justice. Samuel returns." Their argument ended abruptly when Samuel's corpse entered the hall once more. His body twitched unnaturally, his head lolling to one side. With each movement, threads burst from his skin, slithering outward to crawl along the floor. The sheriff aimed his revolver again, but Dinah raised her hand. "Bullets cannot stop him. He is no longer bound by life." Samuel's mouth opened with a sickening tear, and a voice spilled out, not his own, but a chorus of whispers. "You cannot leave, you are stitches in the same cloth, and all cloth must unravel." The group recoiled, terror written on every face. The chapel. They fled, pushing through twisting corridors until they stumbled into the mansion's small family chapel. The candles lit themselves at their arrival, casting long shadows across the pews. Catherine fell to her knees before the altar. "God protect us," she sobbed. "Save my children." But even here, the curse reached. The crucifix on the wall warped, the wooden Christ twisting into something faceless, its arms unraveling into threads that reached toward them. Dinah raised her hands, chanting in a low, steady voice. The shadows recoiled slightly, but not enough. The sheriff grabbed her arm. "If you know how to stop this, do it now." Dinah's face hardened. "Stopping it requires a sacrifice. The blood of a Caldwell must be given willingly." Catherine gasped. "No, not my children." But Dinah did not answer. Madness in the ranks. As tension rose, one of the servants broke. His eyes went wide, laughter spilling from his cracked lips. "It wants us all. It don't matter who. We're dead already." He grabbed a candlestick and smashed it into the sheriff's face, screaming hysterically. The sheriff stumbled, blood streaming down his cheek, before tackling the servant to the ground. In the struggle, the man's clothes unraveled, binding him like ropes until he suffocated beneath the fabric itself. His body twitched once, then lay still, cocooned in his own clothing. The survivors stared in horror. "That makes 2, Constance whispered weakly. 7 remain. Catherine's choice. Catherine clutched her daughters, tears streaming down her face. She turned to Dinah, her voice breaking. "If it must be me, if my blood will save them, then take me. And this." Dinah's eyes softened, but only slightly. "It may not be enough. The curse runs deeper, but your offering may weaken it." The sheriff shook his head, grim and resolute. "No, we'll find another way. This curse is old, but no curse is unbreakable. We'll burn the house down if we have to." But as he spoke, the chapel door slammed shut. The sound of Samuel's dragging footsteps echoed in the hall beyond. He was coming for them again. Midnight's warning. The grandfather clock chimed again, though none were near it. Each toll rang through the chapel like a funeral bell. Constance stirred, her small voice trembling yet clear. "When the last thread is cut, the house will not stand. It will collapse into the earth, and all inside will be buried with it." The sheriff's face went pale. "Then we don't just have to survive, we have to escape before the last thread is gone." Dinah's gaze turned to the children, then to Catherine. "The cloth is almost done. But there may yet be one stitch left to break." The footsteps grew louder. Samuel was almost at the door. And the Caldwell curse was far from finished. Checkmark. End of part 9. Here the tension is at its peak. The survivors learn the curse's origin, Samuel's corpse hunts them, and Dinah reveals that only a Caldwell's sacrifice can weaken the curse. The mansion itself is consuming lives one by one, with Constance acting as a vessel for the spirits' warnings. Would you like me to make part 10 the final showdown, with the last survivors facing the curse head-on, the house collapsing, and the terrible choice of who, if anyone, can break it? Part 10 The final thread. Hook. Every curse begins with a stitch. But every stitch must end with a tear. On that storm-choked night, as the Caldwell mansion groaned like a dying beast, the survivors realized they were not fighting for escape anymore. They were fighting to decide who would be the last thread cut from the cloth of doom. The door splinters. The chapel shook as Samuel Caldwell's corpse pressed against the door. Each strike of his hand made the wood splinter, each groan of his throat carried the weight of centuries. Threads wriggled under the door like pale worms, reaching for the survivors' ankles. Catherine clutched her daughters to her chest. The sheriff raised his revolver, though both knew it was useless. Dinah stepped forward, her voice calm, her eyes steady. "The house will not stop until it has fed its due," she whispered. "One bloodline began this curse, and one bloodline must end it." Catherine's lip trembled. "You mean mine. The bargain." The sheriff grabbed Dinah's arm. "You want her to die? That's madness. There must be another way." Dinah's gaze hardened. "Madness is thinking you can outrun the grave when it already has your name. The curse does not ask, it demands." Catherine lifted her chin, though her face was pale. "If it spares my children, I will do it." Her words froze the room. Constance stirred from Catherine's grasp, her fevered eyes glowing faintly in the candlelight. "No, Mama," she whispered. "It doesn't want you. It wants me." Everyone turned. Constance smiled faintly, too old a smile for her small face. "I have heard them since the storm began. They whisper through the walls. The curse is bound to the youngest Caldwell born under the iron roof." "That is me," Catherine screamed, clutching her tighter. "No, I won't lose you too." But even as she spoke, the chapel door burst open, and Samuel's body staggered inside. The corpse of Caldwell. He towered over them, his skin splitting into strips of thread. His jaw gaped wide, and from his throat spilled voices not his own, hundreds of whispers weaving into one. "The child is the last thread. Give her, or be consumed together." The sheriff aimed, fired his last bullet into Samuel's skull. The corpse swayed but did not fall. Black threads poured from the wound, spilling like hair across the floor. Dinah seized Catherine's shoulders. "You cannot fight it. If she goes, the house dies with her. If she stays, all of you are buried alive." Catherine's scream shook the rafters. No, she's my baby. Dash dash dash. The fire spreads. The house itself groaned in answer. Candles burst into flame without touching a match. The crucifix melted into molten iron, dripping onto the floor. The pews shuddered as if breathing. Solomon fell to his knees, praying, but his words were drowned by the rising roar of the storm outside, and the deeper storm inside. The sheriff grabbed Catherine's hand. Listen to me. If she's the key, then we can't let her be taken by that thing. Maybe there's a way she can choose. If she gives herself willingly, it might end clean. But if it takes her. He didn't finish. He didn't have to. Dash dash dash. The child's choice. Constance stepped forward, slipping free of her mother's arms. Her small hands did not shake. Her eyes, fever bright, locked on Samuel's corpse. You can't have them, she said, her voice trembling but strong. You can have me. Catherine collapsed to the floor, sobbing, clawing at her skirts. Constance, no, please, no. The threads slithered toward the girl, wrapping around her ankles, her wrists, her waist. She did not resist. She only turned once more to her mother. It's okay, Mama, she whispered. When the cloth unravels, we'll be free. And then the house swallowed her. Dash dash dash. The collapse. The moment Constance vanished into the threads, the mansion shuddered. Walls cracked like bones snapping. The roof tore open to the storm, rain pouring in as though heaven itself wept. Samuel's corpse shrieked, his body splitting into strips of fabric that dissolved into ash. Dinah screamed words in an ancient tongue, shielding the survivors as the floor buckled beneath them. Run, the sheriff shouted. They stumbled through collapsing halls, fire spreading along the curtains, walls splitting into chasms. Servants screamed as they fell into the blackness beneath the floorboards. Solomon was crushed by a falling beam, his prayer cut short. At last, Catherine, Margaret, Dinah, and the sheriff burst through the grand entryway. For the first time since the storm began, the door opened. Behind them, the Caldwell mansion screamed as it collapsed inward, vanishing into the earth as though it had never stood. Only a crater remained, glowing faintly with embers in the rain. Dash dash dash. The morning after, the survivors stood in the rain, breathless, broken. Catherine clutched Margaret, her face hollow with grief. Dinah's eyes were heavy with secrets she did not speak. The sheriff, bloodied and bruised, watched the crater with a hard jaw. The storm passed with dawn. Sunlight spilled weakly across the land. The curse was gone, or so it seemed. But Catherine knew better. She could still hear her daughter's last words. When the cloth unravels, we'll be free. And somewhere deep in the silence, carried on the wind, came the faint sound of a child's lullaby, sung in Constance's voice. Dash dash dash. Epilogue. Years later, travelers spoke of the land where the Caldwell mansion once stood. They said nothing would grow there, not a blade of grass, not a flower. And on stormy nights, they swore they saw a little girl in white, standing at the edge of the crater, humming softly, waiting for the last stitch of the world to come undone. Dash dash dash. Checkmark. End of Part 10. Final part. The saga ends with Constance's sacrifice, the mansion collapsing into the earth, and the curse seemingly broken, though a lingering presence remains. Dash dash dash. Loudspeaker call to action for your YouTube audience. If this story gave you chills, don't forget to subscribe for more terrifying tales, share it with friends who love horror and history, and leave a comment below. Tell me, would you dare step inside the Caldwell mansion if it still stood today? Ghost Fire.